In this episode of the Speed Painting HeroQuest series, I'm going to show you how to get these really cool results in a single hobby session of just a few hours using beginner-friendly steps and a handful of techniques that, even if you've been painting for a while, might just teach you a trick or two. This time around we're going to be painting the Abominations, as well as the Fimir from the classic Games Workshop version too. As with all the previous episodes, the miniatures have been cleaned up, any warped plastic fixed, some basing details added, and then primed with grey spray primer. The video description down below is full of handy things like paint lists and links to previous episodes just in case you need to catch up, but if you're all ready to paint, let's just get on with it, shall we? These are, I think, the weirdest looking models in the HeroQuest series so far. I'm not 100% sure I actually like them that much, but let's try to make them look great anyway. And so first off, what we're going to do is build up a deep blue to cool green transition on the bodies. It sounds hard, but honestly, it's really simple to do. I'll start off by using a dark midnight blue paint, thin it with a little bit of water so it flows really nicely, and then base coat the bodies of all the miniatures. Only really leaving the bases unpainted, but it doesn't really matter if you're a bit sloppy here, just get the paint on. Once that's dry, I sped mine along a little bit by giving it a quick blast with a hairdryer. Now let's mix up a new paint colour by combining equal parts of the same deep midnight blue and green. This will make a nice deep teal colour. Now using a flat bushy brush, get some paint on it, wipe most of it off on a bit of paper or just your palette, and start overbrushing this teal onto the top half of each model. There's not too much paint on the brush, but enough to put a pretty decent coat of colour down, but not so wet that it'll go into the recesses. Focus on the shoulders, heads, arms and torsos. You can also add a little bit towards the thighs and knees, but get lighter and lighter as you go down, to the point where you barely even touch the feet. And now we're going to reinforce the green by using just our green paint on its own, and using the same technique, but really just focusing on the prominent bits like the head, shoulders and tops of the hands if you like too. Now let's add a little bit more lightness towards the focal points on the face by doing a 1-to-1 mix of the same green paint but with a bone coloured off-white paint. This will desaturate it and also lighten it up a bit. This time around though, we're going to be dry brushing instead of overbrushing. So this is where you wipe off practically all the paint on your palette or paper before you go near the model. This way, the paint only rubs off against the raised areas, leaving the darker tones in the recesses untouched. This will also really help bring out the details, which these models have loads of on the faces and heads. Now, in the community, I've seen these models painted with the plates on their arms and legs as chitinous scaly skin plates, but also as actual metal armour, and to be honest I think I prefer the metal armour look, so that's how I'm going to do mine. You could choose either silver or gold here, but as I want these to be on the cooler colour temperature side, I'm going to go for this steely silver. Now just spend a little bit of time going over each model, laying down a nice neat base coat on the plates of armour. They're all really easy to access, and this bit is actually pretty fun to paint, a nice break from all the fiddly bits on the orcs, goblins and dread knights. I also painted all the pointy bits of the weaponry too. A simple medium brown will work really nicely to base coat all of the fabric parts of the weapons and handles, which there aren't too many of on the newer Abomination models, but the old Fimir model has this kind of bondage harness thing going on, which I love for them, but it is quite tricky to paint. Now don't be afraid to tidy up any mistakes you make on the skin with a quick touch of the same greeny blue we just used. It'll probably still be wet on the palette. I'm also going to paint the little starfish stuck to the Abomination's shoulders with this brown too. We can build up on this later, but brown right now makes it really easy. If you're painting some Fimir models too, now would be a great time to go back to your silver and just pick out all those studs with your detail brush now the brown base coat is done. And for an extra detail on the Abomination models, you could carefully base coat the little belt details at the waist too. Okay, things are starting to come together. Let's quickly tidy up the bases with a quick coat of grey paint, being a little bit careful not to accidentally get paint on their little fish feet. And now we're going to base coat a few key details with our bony off-white colour. First, eyeballs. These are nice and big and easy to reach, so grab your detail brush, start in the middle, and slowly work your way around in little circles until you've covered pretty much the whole eyeball. You can also base coat the rows and rows of horrible nail-like teeth, these little barnacle clusters on their shoulders, as well as their finger and toenails. Now the Abominations also have these cool Guyver style forearm blades, which I'll base coat with an off-white too. Now with the same off-white paint colour, we're going to dry brush the textures on the bases, as well as the handles of the weapons, and also the fabric at the Abominations' waists. I'm not sure why the Fimir has 4 toes on one foot and 3 on the other. Maybe he's from Guernsey. Be careful not to get too much of this on the surrounding areas, otherwise it might end up making them look a bit dusty. Now we're ready to give every bit of every model a nice coat of a dark wash. I mixed black wash and brown wash together in equal parts to get a tone that's more murky and grimy rather than just black. And once that's all over the models and while it's drying, you can give your bases a nice coat of black around the rims, and after they're dry, they'll be ready to game. If you want to stop here, you absolutely can. Everything so far has been pretty straightforward and easy to achieve, and can be easily handled in one painting session. Now if you're feeling a bit confident and want to push your brush skills a little bit further, feel free to do as many of the following steps as you like to make your minis just a little bit more special. Eyeball details can be a real pain in the bum to add, but why not try using the tip of a little cocktail stick instead? Just thin a little bit of black paint so it flows nicely and won't be too blobby, tap the end of your stick into it, and then carefully place it on the eyeball and tippy tap until you have the shape you want. You can do really small if you like, or make it a bit bigger. It's way more like using a pen than a paintbrush, which you might prefer. It's so easy to place the pupils like this, I even made mine look in different directions. One is dead ahead, one is off to the side, and the other one is looking ominously down like he's about to eat your face right off your skull. Now to add some extra grossness, thin down some red paint with water until it starts looking transparent on your palette. Now carefully line this around the outside of the eyeballs to give the models a terrifying, pained look. You can also add this around the mouth and gums, tinting them with a bit more of a fleshy tone. Once that's done, we can add some intentional skin highlights. I mixed up some green and off-white again in equal parts, but now we're going to reflect the slight bluish hue the upper skin has, so I add some tiny bits of that midnight blue, brush tip by brush tip, until it looks about right. Now it's just a case of using your detail brush just to carefully catch all those raised bumps and ridges on the faces and heads. Thinning the paint with a little water will not only keep the paint nice and thin so it flows well, but it'll also make it slightly transparent too, so it doesn't go on really thick and stark. Doing this makes quite a big difference. The one on the left has obviously had the facial features picked out, but the one on the right is still waiting its turn. Definitely worth it, I think. If you want the models to look extra wet and slimy, you can also add a dot or two of the same tone to the upper muscle areas. Just a tiny dot to look like a glinting light will sell the effect. Use your favourite orange, or mix yellow and red like I did, and then just add a careful, stippled on highlight to the central area of the shoulder starfish on the Abominations. That lifts them really nicely, I think. Now if you want any of the armour or weapons to look a little bit shinier after they were dulled down with the wash stage, now's your chance. Just buff a little of your original silver or gold on with quite a dry brush to bring back some sparkle. The final painting element is just going to be adding some more intentional strokes of dark wash into the recesses of areas that look a little bit bland, just to punch in a bit more depth and contrast. Because these models are going to be played with, I'm going to add a thin coat of matte varnish too, just to help the paint job survive the years ahead. And that's it. Abominations and Fimir's done. Even though I still don't think I'm a huge fan of either sculpt, I think they turned out pretty well and will complement the other enemies really nicely. And speaking of which, if you've been following along, you've only got a handful of models still to paint. The Gargoyle, the Dread Sorcerer, and the Heroes. By my count, that's 65 down, 6 to go. Give yourself a pat on the back for a job well done. Please subscribe so you don't miss the last episodes, and like the video if it's given you some inspiration. And by the way, if you're really enjoying the channel, you can head along to midwinterminis.com and check out our merch store. We've got fun stickers, cool t-shirts, really nice art prints. We pack the orders ourselves and we ship worldwide. We also have an amazing community of supporters over on Patreon too, whose names you are seeing right now. We honestly couldn't do these videos without them, so if you fancy helping out in that way, just click the link in the video description. My name's Guy, this is Midwinter Minis, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.